talk to him.
Hi.
Yeah, I'll pull them out for.
Hi, Kay. How are you?
David.
How is everyone? I didn't. All right, let's open the meeting with the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. We're just going to do a little standard business here, and then we'll open up the public hearing, okay? We have meeting minutes for the November 17th meeting. We finalized Robin Day's accessory dwelling unit, which we were very excited about. And our new business was a sketch plan discussion about 10 Buffalo Road minor subdivision. Has everybody had a chance to read the minutes? Okay. Do I have a motion to approve? Todd, second?
I'll
Okay.
second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. All right, it is 7:01. We will open up the public hearing for the final plat. It's the preliminary plat and the final plat for the minor subdivision at 10 Buffalo Road. Lawrence Bratt is our applicant. So, Mr. Bratt had done a sketch plan at the last meeting to subdivide the property into two parcels. One parcel would contain the house and an accessory building, and the other two parcels would contain 3 accessory structures. Here comes Carol, so I'm just going to hold here for a second. We'll wait for you, Carol.
Not me, but I feel sweaty.
So I'm reading in double because I have the Mylar here, so just let me move the Mylar so I. Okay. So the bigger parcel would contain the, is that true? The bigger parcel, the 3.
Versus the home and one.
Yes,
accessory
parcel
dwelling.
1 is the larger parcel with the home. Parcel 2 has the 3 accessory structures on it. So this is how the minor subdivision works. Now that we have the final plat, what I do is Gary gets the final plat to review, our code enforcement officer. He takes a look at it, and we're going to let Gary have a little discussion here on what he has found, and then if there's any public comment after that, we can discuss that.
Okay, so last meeting we talked about if the accessory buildings could be sold without a permanent dwelling on that piece of parcel. So once we got this final plat, we looked into it a little bit more, talked to the county, we talked to some other code officers, and with our new zoning law, you cannot section that off with those 3 accessory buildings. unless you have a permanent dwelling on that section. So you won't be able to do it unless there's a permanent dwelling there.
So
Is that just because of the new zoning? Because when he bought the property, that was a separate parcel and it was just the barn.
that is correct.
Right.
It's the new zoning law. It's the new zoning law. We, when we went back and looked at it, Gary and I were discussing it. Gary reached out to, our interpretation originally was that it was possible to do it.
And
Well,
that,
you do have provision for non-residential, right? I could sell it if it had no buildings on it? Is that,
That is correct. That is correct. It's section 5.4 of the zoning law. It talks about having to have a primary residence on it. And that was a section that we were reviewing at the sketch plan.
yeah.
And our original interpretation of it was that it did not need a primary dwelling. But after we got the final plat and started discussing it with other code enforcement officers and really looking at that section, it does say that a primary dwelling has to be on it. And we actually talked to the county today to really get, we're still working with this new zoning law. We've only had it now for like a month and a half.
Yeah.
So we wanted to make sure that our interpretation was the same after Gary went and talked to some of the code enforcement officers that he knows to get some other consultation on the project, just to make sure, and that was what the county interpreted it as well.
So if I sold it with no buildings on it, he couldn't put a structure on there
Unless
unless
it was
it's a
a prim-
primary
Correct.
dwelling.
If it was a primary dwelling, that could be put on there. So if the property was vacant, you could not put an accessory structure on there without a primary dwelling. If you put a primary dwelling, then an accessory structure, that would be permissible.
Is that because it's zoned residential?
Yes, it's part of the residential zoning.
Can this be sold as a building lot with the intent of putting a primary structure on it?
It is zoned as a low-density residential lot.
Yeah, but with the intent of putting a primary residence on it?
It can't be subdivided with only the accessory structures on it at this point. If there
Right, okay.
was a primary dwelling on there,
then you,
then you could. Then you could. Does anybody from the planning board have comment? No. It's page 19, 5.4 under accessory uses and structures. That is the zoning code. It's A1. Not to be established or constructed until a primary use or structure is constructed.
Does that mean that I could put a second residential structure on the parcel as it is, then subdivide it?
Well, that's an interesting question.
Yeah, you got that word primary in there. Which one is the primary?
That is a very interesting question, Larry.
So what if you put a toilet and a sink in the barn?
Yeah.
Oh, honey.
I was hoping to get rid of you, Larry, as a neighbor, so
I know, but
I was.
you're too close to me. You're 6 inches too close on the property line. You can't make it a residence in the barn.
That's a good question, because
Yeah. This piece of property in this subdivision is incredibly unique. Because of the lot size, the position of the lot, as I was discussing it with the county today, they were in agreement that this is an incredibly unique situation. I guess that's it.
So was the intent of that new zoning law?
There isn't, well, there's no other property in the village that could remotely even have this issue.
Right.
This is a
Well,
very,
okay, then if there is no other property in the village that could have this issue, can an exception be made for this?
we can't make it here, Gary can't make it. It would have to go to appeals, and it would be an interpretation on the appeal.
But, but you're talking about the new zoning law for the village of Bergen.
Right.
So why can't, I guess I don't understand why you guys can't make that decision.
That's not our legislative duty as planning board members. So Gary sees the final plat on the subdivision, and then it comes to us, that was today. But when Gary got the final plat and looked into it, it didn't meet the zoning requirements, the interpretation of the zoning requirements. The reason that it's in there, that there is to be a primary dwelling on the residence, is so that if you tear your house down, say your house, you tear it down, that all of our properties aren't barns and pole barns, that would be allowed on a vacant parcel, if we didn't have the primary dwelling. Do you understand how that?
I don't understand the logic of it, but I do understand the
Trust me, Larry, this is such an odd and interesting, we discussed it about having the 3 accessory structures on it at our last meeting. When we looked into it further,
yeah, nobody knew the code at the time, right?
it was, I mean, we've only had this code for a month and a half. That's one of the things that I was discussing with Felipe. Is there any other area in which it could be permitted? I mean, there's really only one way to have it permitted, and that would be an amendment to the zoning law.
How about your variance procedure?
It's an interpretation, it would be an interpretation of the zoning law. The county felt pretty confident that the interpretation would be that there has to be a primary dwelling on it. That's why the ZBA, the appeals process, would be an interpretation. That would be what you would be appealing, the interpretation. It is that section 5.4 on accessory structures is in here to protect the village as a whole. I know your property is a unique property, it's large.
Right.
There's certainly enough room to put a house if you subdivided it, we discussed it last time. But it is to protect the village so that,
And would it be allowable to tear all 3 buildings down, then subdivide?
yes, I believe that would be permissible. If you took them down, then you could subdivide. Because there's no accessory structures on it anymore. Then there's,
But then a primary residence would have to be built.
yes,
Right.
if you subdivided and sold, whoever bought that property, if they did not wanna keep it vacant, would have to have a primary dwelling first.
You said if they don't wanna keep it vacant.
You can keep it vacant, you can own vacant property here in the village. You just couldn't, if you tore the 3
Right,
structures down and then subdivided,
right, okay.
then if you sold that off, then they would have to make it a primary dwelling.
So the first building up would have to be a primary
Correct.
residence, right?
Mhm.
We've already lost that opportunity because back
Right.
in the 19th century, somebody put 3 buildings on it.
That's correct.
Okay.
Tear down those chocolate house.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Does anybody else have any public comment? Okay. Then we will close the public hearing. We can't take any action on it because Gary has denied, want to officially deny that,
Yeah.
Gary?
Yes, I will officially deny that you cannot subdivide that without a primary dwelling.
So, do I have a motion to close the public hearing? Okay, all in favor? David, second, all in favor? Aye. All right, that's all the business we have tonight. Larry, we will be refunding you your, minor subdivision and public hearing fee.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I'll get you back to. I'm gonna get you back to Mylar,
Okay.
okay?
Well,
Did the surveyor.
well,
I'm really sorry.
for a ride?
What was the question?
Do you have
For a ride.
any other business?
Yeah, we do? Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Yes, you can come with us. Can you come with us? Thank you.
Yeah.
It's money.
Brainstorm.
I'll catch up with you.
Yes. But I don't know if you can have 2 homes on one property. Right.
Utilities,
Uh-huh,
bedroom, bathroom, kitchen,
could be.
and then that became the primary dwelling.
Right.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Night, everybody.
Good night.
No matter how long they get in, it's needed to be kind of for
Right. Yeah, I just,
Well, it's definitely a unique situation.
yeah,
Because any other property in the village,
You couldn't even do that to it.
right,
Yeah.
yeah. So do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I.
Kate, second. Carol, all in favor?
Aye.
I'm gonna go turn the camera on.
This is the same people who did my survey. And I just paid for it.
there aren't too many.
Yeah.
Yeah. There aren't a lot around, yeah.